I'm Dr. Shinomol George from the Department of Life Sciences. Under the General Physiology topic, I'll be taking transport of respiratory gases today. Oxygen transport in the blood, oxygen is transported via blood, but oxygen is not very soluble in liquids. A small amount of oxygen does dissolve in the blood and is transported in the bloodstream, but it is only about 1.5% of the total amount. The majority of oxygen molecules are carried from the lungs to the body's tissues by a specialized transport system which relies on the erythrocyte, that is a red blood cells. Erythrocytes contain a metalloprotein known as hemoglobin, which serves to bind oxygen molecules to the erythrocyte. Heme is portion of the hemoglobin that contains iron, and it is the heme that binds to oxygen. One hemoglobin molecule contains 4 iron-containing heme molecules, and because of this, each hemoglobin molecule is capable of carrying up to 4 molecules of oxygen. As oxygen diffuses across the respiratory membrane from the alveolus to the capillary, it also diffuses into the red blood cell and is bound to this hemoglobin. The following reversible chemical reaction that is shown down is describing the production of the final product, that is oxyhemoglobin, which is formed when oxygen binds to hemoglobin. Oxyhemoglobin is a bright red colored molecule that contributes to the bright red color of this oxygenated blood. You can see hemoglobin plus oxygen, which is a reversible reaction, gives rise to oxyhemoglobin. In this formula, the Hb represents reduced hemoglobin, that is hemoglobin that does not have oxygen bound to it, and the Hb-O2 represents the oxyhemoglobin. There are multiple factors involved in how readily heme binds to and dissociates from oxygen. So some of the factors we will see: the oxygen, dissociation and hemoglobin. So partial pressure is an important aspect of the binding of oxygen to and dissociation from heme. An oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve is a graph that describes the relationship of partial pressure to the binding of oxygen to heme and its subsequent dissociation from heme. Gases travel from an area of high pressure to an area of lower partial pressure. That's a common phenomena. In addition, the affinity of an oxygen molecule for heme increases as more oxygen molecules are bound. Therefore, in the oxygen hemoglobin saturation curve, as the partial pressure of oxygen increases, a proportionately greater number of oxygen molecules are bound by heme. Not surprisingly, the oxygen hemoglobin saturation dissociation curve also shows that the lower the partial pressure of oxygen, the fewer oxygen molecules are bound to heme. As a result, the partial pressure of oxygen always plays a major role in determining the degree of binding of oxygen to heme at the site of the respiratory membrane, as well as the degree of dissociation of oxygen from heme at the site of body tissues. Here the 3 graphs that are showing the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation and the effect of pH and temperature. The left side graph with the green bar alone is where the partial pressure of oxygen and hemoglobin saturation is being shown. The middle graph, the effect of pH and oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve, you can see as the pH is increasing from 7.4 to just 7.6. Towards the left side, that orange line indicates the pH at the dissociation curve at pH 7.6. It becomes difficult for the oxygen molecules to dissociate from hemoglobin. Unless until these oxygen molecules are dissociated from the hemoglobin, the body cannot be utilizing that oxygen. Same is the case when the pH lowers just to 0.2, that is pH 7.4 to pH 7.2. When it becomes also what happens is like the opposite of that the hemoglobin becomes very easily dissociable and it cannot be utilized properly. Whereas coming to the third graph that is showing, which shows the effect of temperature on the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve, it shows that at different temperatures how the dissociation curve is moving towards the left. That means as the temperature decreases, it becomes difficult for the oxygen to dissociate from the hemoglobin molecule. Factors other than partial pressure also affect the oxygen hemoglobin saturation dissociation curve. For example, a higher temperature, as I shown earlier, promotes hemoglobin and oxygen to dissociate faster, whereas lower temperatures inhibit dissociation. Certain hormones such as androgens, epinephrine, thyroid hormones and growth hormones can affect the oxygen hemoglobin saturation dissociation curve by stimulating the production of a compound called 2,3-bisphosphoglycerate (BPG) by the erythrocytes. The pH of the blood is another factor that influences the oxygen hemoglobin saturation dissociation curve. Another thing is like Bohr effect, which is a phenomenon that arises from the relationship between pH and oxygen's affinity to hemoglobin. The Bohr effect is that a lower, more acidic pH promotes oxygen dissociation from hemoglobin. In contrast, a higher or more basic pH inhibits oxygen dissociation from hemoglobin. The greater the amount of carbon dioxide in the blood, the more molecules that must be converted, which in turn generates hydrogen ions and thus lowers the blood's pH. Furthermore, blood pH may become more acidic when certain byproducts of cell metabolism such as lactic acid, carbonic acid and carbon dioxide are released into the bloodstream. Here we can see the carbon dioxide transport in blood. Carbon dioxide is transported by three major mechanisms. The first mechanism of carbon dioxide transport is by blood plasma, as some carbon dioxide molecules dissolve in the blood. The second is the transport in the form of bicarbonate ions, which also is dissolved in the plasma. The third mechanism of carbon dioxide transport is similar to the transport of oxygen by erythrocytes by forming the carbaminohemoglobin. The next, respiratory and metabolic acidosis and alkalosis is the next topic we have to study in relation to this. Respiratory acidosis and alkalosis are due to a problem with the lungs, whereas metabolic acidosis and alkalosis are due to a problem with the kidneys. Each of these conditions is caused by an underlying disease or disorder, and treatment depends on what is the separate causes that are identified by a doctor. Normal arterial blood pH is restricted to a very narrow range of 7.35 to 7.45. A person who has a blood pH below 7.35 is considered to be in acidosis, actually the physiological acidosis, because blood is not truly acidic until its pH drops below 7. And a continuous blood pH below 7 can be fatal. A person who has a blood pH above 7.45 is considered to be in alkalosis, and a pH above 7.8 is fatal. Both acidosis and alkalosis can be caused by either metabolic or respiratory disorders. Symptoms of acidosis and symptoms of alkalosis comparison I have done in this slide. You can see the acidosis symptoms of the central nervous system include headache, sleepiness, confusion, loss of consciousness and going into coma. Respiratory system symptoms include shortness of breath, coughing, whereas the symptoms related to heart include arrhythmia, increased heart rate, and the muscular system symptoms include seizures and weakness, and digestive system symptoms include nausea, vomiting and diarrhea. Whereas the symptoms of alkalosis of the central nervous system include confusion, lightheadedness, stupor, finally coma, and the peripheral nervous system develops hand tremor, numbness or tingling in the face, hands or feet, and muscular system will show symptoms like twitching and prolonged spasms, whereas the digestive system has the symptoms like nausea and vomiting, which is somewhat similar to acidosis. Thank you.